And I remember looking at her and being horrified at the thought that she was going to go to hell because she wasn't going to church with us. And so my journey started, seeking something else that meet the needs of my wild and wonderful soul, that I didn't need to hold on to a theology, that I could experience the numinous in my own way. It isn't something out there and me here. It is this connection, the spirit and the sacred and I, we are one. It created this steam around the trees, and the sun was coming through the back of them. And it was just this majestic sight. It was like they were holy.
Welcome to the Spacious Unknown. I'm your host, Kat Buccentini. This podcast is a place where stories of spiritual lives can be shared, especially those that are a little unconventional. Stories shaped by curiosity and doubt, tenderness and intuition, grief and joy, and the quiet practice of inner listening. Before we begin, a gentle note. Spirituality is alive and always unfolding. What you hear now is one moment in time, one expression of someone's path. I invite you to listen with grace, curiosity, and a tenderness that leaves room for nuance rather than neat conclusions. Today, I'm joined by RONNA, and I invite you to settle in as we explore the shape of her journey. Welcome, RONNA, and thank you so much for coming to speak with me today. And I was hoping you could just start us off with telling us a little bit about what your life looks like right now.
Beautiful. I love that question because it's so open to whatever my life looks like right now. I am a mom. I live in a very cold climate. I live in Yellowknife in the northern part of Canada. And if you're looking at a map, the latitude is about the same as Fairbanks, Alaska. So that's how far north I am. I'm a mother of 3 incredible boys and 2 wonderful stepdaughters, a partner to a great husband, and I have 2 wonderful grandchildren. And they make up very much a part of who I am in this place right now. As a person, though, I think where I am in my life is really a seeker. My wild and curious soul puts me in a place of deep seeking, spirituality and community, connection with the earth. And so when I think of where I am at this point in my life and who I am, that is a huge part of it. I'm also privileged that where I live has an incredible indigenous population. And so the connection to those who have been here for millennia, beyond millennia, is really strong. And so we also have that influence here where we live. And that makes a big difference to the place and to how we connect to the earth here as well.
Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm. We're going to kind of move into this little meditation that I do with people. And so I'll invite any listeners to, if it's safe, you can close your eyes and do it with us. Or if you want to just kind of imagine the space that RONNA is in as she describes it, so you can get a sense of her place in this world. And so I'll just invite you, RONNA, to close your eyes, or you can leave them open if you want to, whatever's comfortable for you. And just start by taking some deep cleansing breaths, allowing yourself to relax as you exhale. And then start to notice the places where your body touches the space around you, those textures and pressures. Just noticing the support beneath you and knowing that it extends all the way to the earth itself.
I can feel myself supported by my chair and my feet supported by the floor. And I have a sense of further support from the earth beneath my feet. I can feel the warmth of the sun coming through the window and just a sense of calm and peace as I sit here breathing.
I'm going to have you turn your attention to the air around you and describe its temperature and humidity or dryness, the places where it touches your skin, how it feels.
The air is warm but dry, as we're still very cold here. So it's heat from the furnace that I appreciate very much, but it is a dry air.
So as you sit in that warm, dry air, I want you to notice what sounds it brings to your ears.
I can hear the song of a few sparrows, I believe, outside my window, and the creaking of the house as it sort of settles in to being warm and the cold outside, and how that affects the noise that the house makes every once in a while.
With your next in-breath, I'll just have you notice what smells are lingering in the air around you.
I can smell the ginger lemon kombucha that I'm drinking this afternoon. It brings up good memories of making the kombucha with my husband and sharing it with friends. It's kind of tangy, I guess. Definitely the smell of ginger is there, but there's also the tang that often comes with kombucha as a drink. So almost not quite vinegary, but tangy.
And then just following your air, that inhale down a little bit, and noticing any taste lingering in the back of your throat, in your mouth, or on your tongue.
Mm. The same, the tang of the lemon from my drink and a bit of sweetness as well. It's probably what I'm noticing now.
So following your air down into your lungs, just notice the way that your body shifts and moves to accommodate it, allowing yourself to settle with that in-breath and out-breath. And then turning inwards, I want you to notice where you might be holding a place of stillness today in your body.
Definitely feel a connection and a stillness in the soles of my feet to the earth right now. Feeling just that they have been placed and they are secure and they are grounding me.
So I just invite you to rest and breathe into that stillness. And before you open your eyes, I want you to imagine what it would be like to open them at the rate of a sunrise. So just kind of that slow light showing up on the horizon and different things in the world coming into view as more light makes its way into the world.
Again, the beautiful sun coming through my window, and just all the colors around me seem much more intense than they did before we started. I have a poster of words in front of me that inspire me, and they are all different colors, and I do notice the colors more right now. And there's one of them that says, "Be a light for peace." And it's red and yellow and orange and black and white. And it's quite striking right now. Be a light for peace.
Be a light for peace.
Mm.
Light from the sun and light from the soul.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Well, welcome back. And thank you again for coming on. I'd like to just start with having an idea of where your spiritual formation has come from, starting when you were younger and moving through to now.
For sure. I grew up in a family that was part of an evangelical Christian tradition. And it was very much a part of our lives socially as well. So we spent a lot of time at the church. And I have very fond memories of that as a child and the experience of being in community. And it continued to be a big part of my life right up into my 20s. But I remember distinctly at the age of around 9 or 10, having an experience one morning when we were driving down our driveway on our way to church on Sunday. And I looked out the window to our neighbor's house, and I loved these neighbors. They were lovely people. And she was in her front window. She was doing some tapestry on a loom that she had. And we were driving to church. And I remember looking at her and being horrified at the thought that she, based on what I'd been taught, she was going to go to hell because she wasn't going to church with us or to church anywhere. And that memory is so striking. I've carried it with me my whole life, just the recognition of that, understanding that came to me in that moment of what I had been taught, and just being really upset by that and not understanding the consequence of what I've been taught. And I think that was the beginning at that young age of a real independent seeking of what eventually has become an incredible individual spiritual experience for me with the sacred outside of the church. Mm. So I continued in the Christian church into my 20s, and there were times that I recognized that it wasn't quite what I needed in my life. I remember when my children were young and going to Sunday school, and some of the teachings that they encountered there, and trying to explain them to them as we'd go home after church, and recognizing that I wasn't sure that where we were going to church anymore actually continued to meet my sense of the sacred and my sense of what it meant to be a part of a loving community. And so my journey started seeking something else that would meet the needs of my soul, my wild and wonderful soul. And that was a beautiful journey into spiritual seeking. I had a real need to find out exactly what it was about the theology of the church that wasn't fitting well for me. And so I did a lot of study and then moved into places reading different books and different authors. One in particular, John Shelby Spong, was an American author that I really needed at the time, who gave me permission to question the things I was questioning. And that was a real gift to me at the time. Mm-hmm. And eventually moved into looking at Buddhism, looking at universalism, just anything I could get my hands on that was slightly different, and that pulled in the idea of the sacred, of peace, of love, sort of at the center of what it was teaching. Mm. And ultimately, probably about 20 years ago, decided that I had my own relationship with the sacred. I was having direct experiences of spirituality that were all mine, and that I didn't need to hold on to a theology or a particular religion, that I could experience, the numinous, sometimes we call it, in my own way. And that was a liberating experience for me and really changed the way that I have had a spiritual life since then.
Mm-hmm. Was there a moment that helped you realize that?
Actually, my father, who was a minister in the evangelical church, introduced me to someone years ago and introduced me as a seeker. She's a seeker, and she is seeking her path spiritually. And I remember when he said that, it was like And I'd never used the word seeker up to that point. And I remember just feeling so raised up and so heard and seen at that point. And that was really the moment where I thought, oh, I've been crowned a seeker. I'm good with that. And I want to move into that. So yeah, that was a real meaningful moment for me, was when my father acknowledged that in me with pride.
Mm-hmm. What a lovely gift to get from your father. Was that pretty consistent with the way that he was, or was it a surprise to hear him be so open?
No, I was really fortunate. Both my parents were very open to our family questioning our faith, growing stronger through that questioning. And in fact, in many ways, he came along with me on that journey, reading some of the books I was reading, and we would have conversations about them. So there was a real beauty in that relationship over the years of sharing that. Yeah, it was beautiful, and it was a gift. I know that.
Yeah. Gosh, that's so beautiful. Where do you find yourself identifying the sacred now? Like, what does that look like for you? Who does that look like for you? If it's a who, if it's a what, if it's neither.
And that's the question, isn't it? How do I even find the language to describe that to people when we, decide that we're not going to use the language of God or some of the other languages, even things like prayer or faith or holiness. Those can all carry weight to them from our past. So right now, one of the beautiful things that I have come into space with is what people will call the non-duality of God, the non-duality of the sacred, which really represents this fact that it isn't something out there and me here. It is this connection that they are the spirit and the sacred, and we are one. I am divine. And having that sense of divinity within myself has really made a difference for me. But I do certainly struggle with many other ways to identify the sacred. A lot of people, myself included, will talk about a sense of awe. So, for instance, out in nature, you were talking about a sunrise and opening my eyes like a sunrise. And, those experiences give us that incredible sense of awe, which I believe is our experience of the sacred, is my experience of the sacred and the spiritual. It's an energy that I get when I do touch a tree, when I allow myself to feel that connection, or run my hand through the earth, through soil, or listen to the birds. When we open ourselves to those connections, I believe that we have an opportunity to feel spiritual, to feel connected, to feel divine. And so for me, that is how I experience it. I also experience it in relationship to people. I can be sitting with someone and talking to them and feel just something so deep at the center of my being because we've made a connection, because we've talked about something important, because we've shared a grief or a joy. And it is, for me, I find the divine in that. The energy of the sacred is in that, in those human connections as well, in those relationships. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but that's as close as I can come.
Yeah, and it becomes less when we try to put words to it. It's very hard to encompass what we're experiencing through words. And sometimes poetry and art and other things can get closer, but it's just not something that I expect people to always have a well-versed answer in. But that was very good. Yeah, thank you. Very thorough. You mentioned a sense of awe, and I love to hear if there's been particular experiences of awe or wonder or transcendence that have stood out for you throughout your life.
Oh, for sure. And I would say a lot of them that I could describe would be related to nature and my experiences in nature, I can think of one that just happened a few weeks ago. We are experiencing so much cold because of the polar vortex this year.
Mhm.
So our temperatures are much lower. I have 5 trees in my backyard that are jack pine trees. And in the north, they're much smaller because they have a smaller growing season and they have to withstand our cold winters. But I have 5 of them and they're together in a group. And I walked out one day, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, and the sun was coming up behind them. But when I opened my backyard, the warm air from the house escaped, and it created this steam around the trees, and the sun was coming through the back of them. And it was just this majestic sight of the mixing of warm and cold air and the sun and the light streaming through the branches. And it was like they were holy. How do you find another word for that? And I was just in that moment, I felt like I could have dropped to my knees if I'd had my snow pants on for them. But I just thanked the trees so much for being there and creating that moment for me of this sense of greatness, this sense of beauty that really touched my heart. So for sure, that would be one of those moments. I find other times can be when I am given the gift of silence, is another time when I have moments where I can just open myself up to a sense of peace, a sense of calm, and the feeling that comes over me in those moments is what I would describe as numinous, which is mysterious and also a little bit fearful, but just the sense of an energy greater than me, higher power, people would call it. But being a part of that and having that somatic experience of experiencing it in my body is certainly another time when I would say that I have experienced the numinous that way.
I was just hearing this sense of reverence when you talked about the trees. They were reverent. Like that's what came to my mind.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
Yeah. And the holiness in the silence. I mean, there is this need to be able to let go of the kind of mental load that we're carrying in order to meet that holiness
Mm-hmm.
in the silence.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's precious when we can.
Yeah. Very hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's not easy. And it is a place where, again, coming into sort of this individual kind of spiritual experience, finding words for things like contemplation and prayer and going to those places of deep submission and desire for connection, that those places exist for us and have great meaning, and I think are necessary for our overall well-being. So yes, that experience is incredibly important, and taking the time for it, allowing for that space to have those moments. Yeah.
I feel like there's this awareness that having moments of silence, whether they're considered spiritual or not, meditation is often recommended in Western medicine circles as well as other places. And I'm curious if you mentioned a sense of wellness, and what do you think people would get from that, from being in silent, that they don't get if they don't have those moments of silence and being with themselves without their phone or laptop or whatever? contraption is keeping them occupied.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a really important question to be asking right now. I did it just this last Saturday because my family is away. I said I'm turning off my phone for the day. And I didn't do a silent retreat, but it was just me in the house, so it was quite silent. But the thing that I found with when you talk about, devices, they're pulling us. They're constantly pulling us. And it was one of the things that I found just by turning it off for those few hours. I knew I wasn't going to get pulled. So even as I went into meditation, sometimes I forget to turn off my phone when I meditate and it will vibrate. There is this sense of, what am I going to be interrupted by? What is coming? What do I need to attend to is always there. And I think that leaves us in a space where we cannot be fully at rest.
Yeah.
And so doing something like turning off my phone for a few hours allows me to be at rest, fully at rest. And the silence, our busy minds, that's meditation, years of meditation practice, we still are going to have busy minds. But it's allowing the quiet, it's allowing the knowing that we will not be pulled away, that this is a few moments for us, that I think is what makes a difference and gives us that real break from it. I don't have the science to back it up, but for me, that's what it was. I wasn't anticipating being pulled away from anything. I knew I could be fully doing what I was doing.
Yeah, and the world keeps going even without you paying attention to it. You don't necessarily have to be focused on it every minute of every day to have it go on. Something I try to remember myself when I turn things off and don't check email. I'm like, there's always that little slightly panicked, like, what if something comes in that I need to see? And I'm like, there's nothing you need to see today.
I know. But that's a hard thing for us to wrap our heads around now.
Yes. Yeah, especially with the way things seem to change so quickly in the world.
Yes. Yeah. And we've built that in, I think. And I think that's partially where the need for us to be grounded in an energy that we know will give us peace, or it's a place of refuge. I think that is so important for us right now. And when I talk to people about spiritual well-being, I talk about the fact that, we are bombarded by, the best exercise, how many steps, the wonderful conversations around mental health that we have now, which are so good that we are talking about mental health. But it's not often that you will hear conversations about spiritual well-being and what that looks like and how we go there outside of maybe organized religion, but just as a conversation. What are we doing to ground ourselves so that we have a sense of spiritual well-being, that we have an understanding of what a higher power looks like to us, that we are allowing ourselves to feel that really strong, intimate connection to the earth, to other beings, to each other, and to the sacred, however we describe it, that's a conversation that we need to be having more of, I think, is what are we doing to really attend to our spiritual well-being right now? It used to be much easier because that was often just a conversation around going to church. And we had that as a community, that our spiritual well-being would be linked to going to church. But so many people are leaving that community now. But they're not leaving the longing. They're not leaving the desire to know something deeper, to experience something deeper. They just aren't going to those buildings anymore. And so how do we, as human beings, find our place again in terms of our authentic spiritual experiences for ourselves?
Yeah, are there practices or rituals or things that you do that you've developed to help support your spiritual seeking and your spiritual experiences in life?
For sure, there are. A big one for me is journaling, writing things down and getting them out of my head and through the pen and onto the paper is a beautiful experience just in itself for me. It connects me to um, answers, it connects me to questions. I'll often, if I'm reading, pull out my journal and write down anything that's significant and be able to go back to a quote or something like that. So journaling is a really important part of it. I also, I do meditate, but I'm honest about the fact that I'm not always good at it, and I'm not always getting to the meditation cushion as often as I should. But it's there for me, and I seem to have a sense of when I really need to get still, be quiet, and just spend some time meditating. And even if that's to a piece of poetry or to a piece of music or to some kind of chant or phrase that I might say, I think it's really important for all of us to understand that just like there isn't a singular way to experience the spiritual, there's also not a singular way to find peace in meditation or in any practice. So I'll play with whatever I need to play with that day to sort of bring me to center. And then, getting out in nature is just so important for me. The smells, the sights, touching, exercise, the movement is all really, really important to me. And gratitude, I think, is probably another one that I would add down to, the taste of my first cup of tea in the morning, just the way that feels, and really being attuned to what there is that we can be grateful for. Gives me a sense of this wonderful, simple, plain life that I am, a part of that is quite incredible.
Mm-hmm. Are there any cyclical things that you do, like on a yearly cycle or a month cycle or a moon cycle, whatever,
Yeah.
whatever that may be?
I always try and catch the winter and spring solstice. For whatever reason, they seem to hold a lot for me. I like to think of the spring solstice almost as my new year, more so than the new year, simply because it does really feel like a time of renewed energy. So up here, it's still quite dark at New Year. The winter solstice is very dark. And so as we come into the calendar New Year, I still know we've got weeks and weeks of cold and dark. And it doesn't always feel like it's a time for thinking about what's coming. So for me, March and the spring solstice really is like that. And it's a time when I really consider what's coming in the new year and what's birthing for me as I look ahead in time. So that's really important. But otherwise, I think it is just a celebration of the seasons as they come for me. Yeah, finding those things at each stage of the season that I celebrate, whether it's a fire when we go camping in the summer or a walk in the snow or snowshoeing in the winter. Those things sort of just come naturally in terms of the seasons.
Yeah, it's really living in the rhythm of the earth. And yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
you have used a few different names, and I'm curious if there's sacred beings or sacred, names that you use to describe what you would consider a higher power or the sacred or, a few different things, if there's anything in particular that stands out for you.
No, I skirt around it all the time. I'll use the universe or energy or divine energy or the sacred because I need a word for it, it seems. But I would say that if I could, I would leave it unnamed, really, and undefined. But because I have decided, as I speak about it, I figure if I give them all sort of equal play, that I'm capturing everything in not having a name that really seems to be suitable for the bigness of it, the greatness of it, the mystery of it. And so, yes, so I do use a bunch of different words. And in the work that I do as a spiritual companion, of course, you tend to be accommodating people coming from all different places spiritually. So I think that's part of it, is that I've come to use lots of different words as people ask me to also use different words to describe whatever the sacred is for them.
Mm. Are there inner truths or values that guide you?
Hmm. I think one of the inner truths that has come to be good guidance for me is that in fact there isn't one truth, and how important it is to be open to what others are experiencing as the truth, even if it is just to be able to acknowledge that that is their truth. So I think that's a big one. I think for me personally, I know that I need to be grounded in a spiritual experience of some kind. And so I feed that. That is a part of my life. It's a part of who I am and what I do. And it influences decisions I make in my life. So that's another truth, I guess. And that ultimately, again, for me, coming back to love, coming back to peace, coming back to joy, understanding pain, really being curious about what it means to be human is an incredible part of my spiritual journey as well. And not denying any of those, allowing those and allowing them to become part of my experience as a human being, fully as a human being, and how those influence my spiritual journey.
Are there any questions that you are sitting with right now about life, meaning, spirituality, just things that you're reflecting on these days?
I think, like so many people, there is this sense of absolute confusion, maybe, and grief about what we are going through as a planet from a climate change perspective, and also what we're going through as a planet from the perspective of how we're treating each other. And there's a part of me that thought we were beyond some of the things that we seem to be going back to. And so I certainly grapple with the questions of why and why now, and looking for answers to what is this teaching us as we move forward, that we need to make sure we learn this time and learn well uh, in terms of how we are going to continue to be human beings on this planet. So I certainly am grappling with that, grappling with my own holding both, and holding the love that I know from the people that are in my life, the love that I know from the trees in my backyard, and holding the things that I see that are so hateful and painful right now. Holding both, and in my own journey, and making sure I allow myself to be fully present to both those things as I move through life. So those big things, giant things, but also I think there's really striving to be in a place of joy, striving to be doing what I can do to encourage and love others. And those making sure, like always questioning, am I doing enough is a question probably that comes up the most. Am I doing enough about this or about that? And how can I be doing more? And where should I be doing more? It's probably the foundational question that I struggle with the most. What is my capacity and where should I be giving more? So,
You've mentioned joy a few different times, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about why that's meaningful for you, why it's important to you. I mean, other than, people like to be happy, but
yeah.
hey, what is it about joy that's important?
Oh, my joy for me is, again, I know people use language differently, but for me, joy is even deeper than happiness in terms of categories. For me, joy is a foundational part of who I am. And it has been for many, many years. And I feel really fortunate about that. I also really within me have this sense of joy as a needed foundation for everything that everything else sits on. And that joy doesn't have to be exclusive. So there is joy in experiencing sadness and grief. There is, it's that moment of grieving and crying and finding something that's funny in that same moment, and that incredible feeling that you have when the two mix and meet. Joy is almost a way that I survive the world because I can come back to it. I took a course years ago, and it was a group of people that were doing anti-racism work in the United States. And they talked about joy in the struggle and how if as a group they could not find joy, they knew that they would not be able to do the hard work that they had to do, that it had to be both and. So I took that to heart, that joy really needs to be very much a part of everything that I do. And I would say that I feel that it is. And it's a very authentic part of who I am. I come back to it all the time. Just that sense of joy is really important to me.
Where do you feel that in your body?
Yeah, right at the center of my heart. And then it just kind of radiates out. For sure, it's at the center of my heart, this sense of joy.
Does it have like a color or texture or shape or anything?
I'd say it's a bright yellow, but maybe like a white yellow, however I would describe that. But yeah, almost a very dull sunlight, but it's definitely there. It's definitely bright. And yeah, I would say that's the color.
Lovely. Thank you. You've mentioned a few times relationships as being important and connection, and I'm curious where you find spiritual community or support from the larger community, or unless even doesn't have to be larger, but larger than your internal self.
For sure. Yeah. And that's one of the hardest things that I have found over the years is not having a distinct building and community to go to. After I left the church, I can remember one of my friends saying to me, you need to find somebody to talk to about these big, deep questions you're asking because I'm not the person. And so I actually started seeing a spiritual companion, a spiritual director, and found that one-on-one experience was community for me. It was beautiful, continues to be a place where I could have some just incredible conversations about deep questions, to ask questions of of faith to bounce things off of, to share experiences. It was wonderful. And through that experience, I actually ended up going to an interspiritual seminary and found my people through that seminary, and on to studying spiritual companioning as well. Found people who were living in this, what some people call an interspiritual space of, the individual spiritual experience, mystical experience. But when you're all sort of in that space, it's a beautiful way to come together and have community. So I have many, many relationships there. I've also started a small group here called Church That's Not Church, which is my way of saying I would like a community, so I'm going to make one. And that has been a really, really wonderful experience of people coming together in an environment where we, have a reflection, we have meditation, but then we talk about it. So we have this opportunity for all kinds of interesting input from people coming from different backgrounds and just wanting to have a space to talk about the questions they have, or deeper experiences, or what is spirituality if I don't have the language for it. And that has been a wonderful experience for me as well. So those are some of the ways I find community. I don't know if, you could ever create an interspiritual church that would not end up perhaps doing what other organized religions have done. I don't know if it's possible to build a church community of non-church people. I think as close as I've come is Church That's Not Church. So, but I think there are different ways. So I also am being trained in Church of the Wild, which is, yes. So they're a very nature-based organization. And that's another place where I think I can take that concept of spirituality and connection to the earth and create community there as well, based on that thing that we have in common. So I think it's finding your people is what you have to do eventually, and having one or two people that you can talk to, that you can share with. That made a huge difference for me. And
yeah, I always struggle to figure out how to help people, or how to explain what spiritual companioning can do for someone, and or what I do in sessions with people, what we do in sessions with people. And it's so hard to put it into words, like all things that are spiritual. And it's not because it's not deep and meaningful and rich. It's just because it's not a worded practice. It's, in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's an interesting thing that I think so many people would benefit from, but also have such a hard time explaining it to people.
absolutely, yes.
We have a marketing issue.
Oh, yes, I was talking to someone about that just last week. We totally do. And the thing is, it's so needed right now for people. And it goes back to that spiritual well-being. Yeah, it's very hard to describe, but when you're in it, it is such a deepening experience, being companioned by someone when you are looking for answers, when you have these questions that you just don't even know how to word sometimes, when you're looking for discernment. How do I make a decision? Those kinds of things it's hard to find someone that will listen without an agenda and without judgment. And I think that's a key piece to spiritual companioning that we need to make sure people understand, is it is about where you're at right now in your journey and how I can share that journey with you without any agenda and without any judgment.
Yeah. And it's not I mean, similar to counseling, I think like one session isn't going to tell you much. It'll tell you a little bit. It might give you an idea of what the space feels like, but yeah, and in each person that companions someone is different.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah.
Well, as we close, I wanted to invite you to share something for our listeners to savor
Um,
in the closing. And so this is, maybe a mantra that you live by, or just like you mentioned your truths earlier, something around that, just something that you want to leave with them to keep on their minds and hearts as they move through the rest of the day.
I think I would like people to understand that there is spirituality outside of religious organizations, and that our longing for connection is deeply connected to our spirituality, and that there's a growing community of people who are longing and seeking spiritual connection to the sacred, however they define it. And I think that's important to understand, that we have the right and the access to our own authentic spiritual experiences, and that they are beautiful and numinous and beyond anything that we can imagine when we open ourselves to them to explore.
If something in this story spoke to you, you can find ways to engage more deeply with our guests' work through the links connected to this episode. The Spacious Unknown is a living, shared space, and I encourage you to consider adding your voice to the conversation. If you feel the pull to share your own unfolding story, follow the Share Your Story link in the show notes. If you're feeling drawn to explore your own spiritual life more deeply, I've also included information about spiritual companioning. The Spacious Unknown is part of Unfurl, my publication on Substack, and is produced by Embodied Conversations, LLC. Thank you for being here and for listening with care. Until next time, may you keep listening for what is true as you move through the wide and spacious unknown.